Welcome to the Shoulda Bet More podcast presented by Go Boys. Coming up on the show today, Todd Wishnev, professional bettor, will join us. We'll talk some college basketball. He is great with live betting. He and I actually did the March Madness Beating the Book Megapod right before the tournament last year. And I picked Florida Atlantic to go to the Final Four. Todd picked UConn to beat San Diego State in the finals. So hopefully we can recreate some of that magic. But like I said, Todd is very good with college hoops. He's very good in terms of live betting, especially total. So we will pick his brain in terms of how he goes about his process as we'll start here with college basketball. I'm sure for a lot of people, football's over, nothing in the NBA this week. This is the first weekend for casual fans where they sit down and they watch college basketball on a Saturday and Sunday, where usually they'd be watching something else. And the story is UConn. UConn, the number one team in the country. It was a top 5 battle on Saturday, number 1 versus number 4 Marquette. And UConn absolutely buried Marquette, beat them by 28 points. And what's scary for the rest of the country, there was a point where UConn, I think, was like 4 of 18 from 3, wasn't shooting it well from outside, and they were still up like 17 points. I mean, it just, I think the takeaway from this weekend, at least for me, is maybe there is a bigger gap. We all kind of agreed UConn was the best team. UConn was the short shot, the favorite to win the title. I think the takeaway is that maybe the gap between them and everybody else is a little bigger than we thought. And usually you don't want to go chalk in this format in these single elimination tournaments. It's one game, anything can happen. One bad night and you're out. One hot shooting night from the other team, you're out. And it's very hard to go back to back. We haven't seen it since Joakim Noah's Florida team in, what was it, 2006 into 2007. So it's hard. It's hard to do, especially in college now where the turnover on the rosters is such a factor in terms of, you're not going to win the title one year and then bring back basically the same team. A lot of those guys are going to graduate or go to the NBA. That's just the nature of the sport now. But UConn has a real shot to do it. And you look a little deeper, you look ahead to March, and the tournament, it's 1 month from yesterday. It's actually a little later than it starts a little later than usual, where Selection Sunday's on St. Patrick's Day. It's on March 17th, where usually, St. Patrick's Day is usually where you're in like the first, sometimes the second round of the tournament. So, I mean, it's not a lot later, but it is a good, 5, 6, 7 days, almost a week later than usual. So it's a late start to the tournament. The tip off of the Thursday, Friday, I don't count the plains as the start of the tournament. It doesn't start to like the 20th, the 21st. So it is a later start to the tournament, but you look a little deeper. The regionals, there's an East regional that's in Boston. So the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight. So if UConn's in that bracket, which I would think they would be, pretty good shot, barring a collapse of being a 1 seed, being in the East, assume they get to the Sweet 16, which it would take a monumental upset for them not to. You're going to be a situation where not only they're the best team, but they might go to the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight in Boston with a little bit of a home court advantage, which, I mean, you got the best team to add another advantage in terms of being having a good home court. And look, UConn fans travel. We've seen that in Madison Square Garden. We've seen that in past years, 2014 when they won it. Madison Square Garden, it was basically like a home game for UConn, and they were lower in the bracket. That wasn't anticipated, but UConn's going to travel. UConn fans are passionate about this team. There were some down years, so I think UConn fans will really follow them, especially if they're in Boston. I think that will be basically a UConn home game. So look, I can't bet this in Connecticut. DraftKings doesn't offer. I don't even think they offer NCAA futures in Connecticut in terms of winning the title. But I'm looking offshore. There's a 4-1 on UConn, but at Circa in Vegas, there's still a plus 650 on UConn. To me, that's a great price. Again, hard to go back to back, single elimination, anything can happen. But to me, I'm at the point where their biggest opponent is the format of this tournament. The fact that it's single elimination, the fact that, hey, one bad night, anything could happen. If this were best 4 out of 7, I think they'd be a much more overwhelming favorite. The fact that it's one and done equalizes things, but still, UConn's in great shape. And combine that with the fact that Purdue, who a lot of people might have thought is 1A, 2, wherever you'd have them, they had a bad loss in Ohio State. I can't trust them. I don't trust the coach. Outside of Edey, who you can take out of the game. Look, we saw Fairleigh Dickinson take him out of the game last year. Outside of Edey, they are a very average team. They're going to have to prove it to me. They're going to have to prove it to a lot of people. I'm going to have to see it before I believe it with Purdue. And maybe they can get to an Elite Eight, a Final Four. But in terms of beating UConn, in terms of actually winning the whole thing, I would take UConn over Purdue comfortably at this point. So I just think the gap between UConn and Purdue really showed itself this weekend. And if you have access to Circa, if you know somebody that's out in Vegas, plus 650, there's a big difference between 4-1 and plus 650. Again, at 5-1, I think that's pretty good. I'd really like the plus 650. I'm surprised that's out there. You still get them plus 130 at Circa to make the Final Four. Again, if they're in that Boston region, that's a hell of a bet. Other things from college basketball this weekend, Kentucky, who I was starting to wonder. I said this last week to a few people that we were talking. I was, I wonder if it's run its course with Calipari at Kentucky. We've seen some of these older coaches retire a little sooner than expected, whether it's Coach K, Nick Saban, Jay Wright. With the NIL, the transfer portal, you get the sense these older college coaches that have done things a certain way for a long time just don't have the energy to deal with this new system. I wonder if Calipari, who's been at Kentucky 15 years, whether they get sick of him or he gets sick of them and just says, you know what, I don't need this anymore. They say, hey, we're going to go in a different direction. I started to wonder if that's run its course again. He's been there 15 years. He won a title, but it was like a dozen years ago. He hasn't been to a Final Four in almost a decade. Hasn't been to Sweet 16 in 5 years. And they had a bad loss last Saturday against Gonzaga, at home against Gonzaga. And if you're not paying attention, Gonzaga, this is not the typical Gonzaga 1, 2, 3 seed. That's a mainstay in the tournament. They are a bubble team. They are not a good team this year. So for them to go into Kentucky and win, and Kentucky hadn't been playing well, he started to question the direction. But Kentucky bounced back. They played well against Ole Miss on Tuesday, a game they were supposed to win, but they defended well, which is the thing you worry about with Kentucky. Then they had a statement dominant win in Auburn where they actually won both halves, won the game by 11 points in Auburn. Auburn's a good team, especially on offense. That's a tough place to win. So maybe we don't kick dirt on Kentucky yet. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of NBA guys. So Kentucky was a big takeaway for me for this weekend. They are, again, looking offshore here. These prices vary. Shop around 33 to 1 to win it all. You do always go through that thing of, hey, if I like a team, do I take them 33 to win it all, or do I wait till they get to the tournament and just bet them every game on the money line and roll it over? Especially if you're Kentucky and you're talking about like a 6 or a 7 seed, maybe that's the better way to go. I know people don't sometimes have, I don't know, the time, the discipline to do that. You make it bet once or twice, and then you start to see that money in your account, and you shrink a little bit, and you don't make the same size bet the next time. The Chiefs were 10 to 1. It's interesting. The Chiefs were 6 to 1 to win the Super Bowl before the season started. You can say, boy, if you bet that, that's a hell of a bet. You got Mahomes at 6 to 1. Well, before the night of the playoffs, they were 10 to 1. And if you did a money line rollover, just bet them game by game by game, you ended up with like 20 to 1. So sometimes it's better to just go game by game. Again, people sometimes don't have the patience, discipline, foresight, whatever to do it. People want to take that, 30, 40 to 1, stick it in their pocket. It's like a little trophy, and they just say, hey, I made my bet. I got my 30 to 1. I don't have to worry about it, think about it, which I understand, but keep that in mind. Sometimes it's better to go game by game. But Kentucky gets off the mat. Maybe they're a factor down the stretch here. Maybe they're a factor deep into March. It's more fun when they're good. It's more fun when Calipari's in the mix. I like Calipari. He's good for the game. Seems like a decent guy. He's got a good personality, sense of humor. Always like Calipari. So hopefully he has a run in them. And they have a lot of athletes. You just worry, if they can defend at a high enough level. Before we get to Todd, a few other things like Florida Atlantic was a team I loved last year. I picked them to go to the Final Four, like I mentioned. They are not the same team. Now you wonder if that's just, hey, they made the Final Four and that was sort of like a championship for them, and it's a little of a hangover, or just they're not the same team this year. They don't play defense as well. So just bouncing around here, looking at things that stood out. I know people might see them this year, be tempted to pick them. I don't love them as much as I did last year. Again, are they playing possum, or are they just not as good as last year? Could be a little bit of both, but they haven't defended well. They haven't rebounded well. They did beat Arizona right around Christmas, but not the same Florida Atlantic team. So college basketball taking center stage this weekend. I could not get into any of the NBA stuff. We're taping this right as the All-Star game is going on, or is about to start on Sunday night, just so we get out Monday morning. The All-Star game did get bet under. There were some whispers, or not just whispers. Silver came out and said, hey, I want a more competitive game. I think we're all on the same page. The game has become a joke. It's, again, paraphrasing, but I mentioned on the show before the weekend with Kelly, hey, this game has gotten away from them, where it's become a layup line. They just stand around and watch each other dunk. It's not even a basketball game anymore. So we'll see if that ended up coming true, and they play a normal basketball game. It used to be a normal basketball game. So it did get bet under with a lot of people with that same line of thinking, like, hey, when a total is, in the 360s and then in the 350s, it doesn't take much defense to stay under. So that did get bet under. But other than that, boy, the All-Star weekend has really lost its luster. The three-point shootout, fine. You watch these guys shoot threes, very impressive. Okay, that's one thing, I guess, that's half watchable. But I can't get into these skill competitions, the Friday night little tournament with the 4 different teams, the G League and then the rookie team, and all. I can't get into it. Curry shooting the 3-point competition against the girl from the WNBA, Ionescu. I can't get into that. She shot the ball well. She's a hell of a player. Don't care. Not into it. These little gimmicks, there's you got to give them credit, I guess, for trying things, but these little gimmicks do not do it for me. And speaking of not doing it for me, the slam dunk contest, I think the way to fix it, first of all, there's only so many variations of dunks the human body can do. This dunk contest has been around for decades and decades. The star players don't want to do it. The guy who won it, again, McClung's not even in the league. I mean, there's only so many things you can do. There's only so many things you can do with it. And again, when you have no names doing it, it kills it. And there's just eventually you run out of dunks. The human body you can only dunk over so many people, dunk from certain angles, blindfold, jump over this, jump over that. I mean, at some point, it's run its course. So what I think they should do, the only way to save it, I actually think this might work. Get rid of it. And then 3 years from now, 5 years from now, bring it back, because people love to be nostalgic. People, if you got rid of it and then 3 years later, 5 years later, you brought it back, people say, "Oh, it's back. I'm excited." Maybe people will be excited if, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So maybe if you got rid of it and brought it back, maybe that would restore some of the luster. And again, you need some way to get the stars in. And if you gave it like a little 5-year breather and brought it back, maybe some of the stars would do it. You could rebrand it. You'd have a new view of it, a new appreciation for it. But other than that, total waste of time. The All-Star Weekend's a total waste of time. So down the stretch in the NBA, we did a lot of NBA on the show Friday. That was good with Kelly, if you want to go back and listen to that. But down the stretch here, only one more weekend left in February. We got through this weekend, one of the deader sports weekends of the year. That and like the week of the All-Star game, NBA All-Star game and Major League Baseball All-Star game. Those are two of the deader times, at least during the NBA All-Star game. You can do have college basketball, but key is always making it through February. We got through one weekend in February. We get through another one next weekend. And before you know it, we turn the page to March. And then it is conference tournaments, which are great because you have games all day, all night. They start in the afternoon. You get random time. You turn on the TV and you can find a game, 3 games, 5 games. Once they start, they don't stop it, which leads into Selection Sunday, the tournament. And then before you know it, baseball opening day, NFL drafts, just everything, NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. It's a great time of the year. We're not that far from it. So we gotta slum it for another week or so in February, but we will still have great shows. I think we got Iron Eagle coming later in the week. We'll still have great guests, great content. But from a sports fan standpoint, let's face it, February is a little bit of a down period. But again, it brightens up quickly and it brightens up soon. So speaking of brightening up, Todd Wishnev, the great one, will join us next. We'll talk some college hoops. That is next. This is the Shoulda Bet More podcast. All right, we are back. Shoulda Bet More podcast. It is time to talk some college hoops. You can hear him on the Beating the Book Megapod, the Showtime Series action. It is the great one, Todd Wishnev. Todd, what's going on, man? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Willie, how are you?
I'm good. I do want to warn you, Fezzik has been known to listen to this time to time. If you make any mistakes, as slight as they may be, he's not shy about correcting us. So just be aware that that Steve might be listening along.
I promise not to moneyline parlay anything today.
I started the show with UConn. Let's start there because they have a big win. And then you couple that with Purdue losing. There's some 5-1s out there. I know Circa's plus 650. You could have gotten better prices, but is this still a good price to you? Are they far and away the best team in your mind?
I mean, I got them 11-1 like a couple weeks ago. I've been a believer in them since last year. Of course, I had them 22-1 last year, or 24-1, something like that. I think they're the best team. I don't think Purdue's very good at all. I think Purdue is one, monster guy, and the rest of the team is, good, but they're not great. And that guy's soft. And, he makes his free throws sometimes, but he misses them other times. I would not be shocked at all if Purdue gets knocked out early again this year. This past weekend, we saw them lose to Ohio State. I just don't think they're a very tough, gritty team like UConn is. So, I don't know. Should they be, so low as 6-1? I don't know. That's kind of low, especially, there's some other good teams out there. Like Houston is very good. I think on defense, that's a kind of NCAA tournament type team. I don't really like Arizona. I don't really like Tennessee. I don't really like Alabama. I don't really like Auburn. I mean, Iowa State I like, but, none of these teams really scare you.
I'm surprised to hear you say Houston. I think you were pretty down on them last year, and a lot of people, were they the number 1 seed overall last year? I can't remember. They were a 1 seed, and you were very skeptical of them. I think your quote was they suck, and they ended up losing really in bad fashion in the Sweet 16 against a mediocre Miami team, just buried them. So I'm a little surprised to hear you high on Houston.
Well, it's not that I'm high on Houston. I just think I don't think they're as good as Connecticut, that's for sure. I just think that they're designed to win in the NCAA tournament with their defense. That's all, because their defense is going to come every night. I think they're, last year I was kind of a little bit down on them, but I'm not as down on them as I was last year. But I mean, if you're going to tell me, okay, Houston or you know Auburn or something like that, or Houston against Illinois or something like that, I'll take Houston. Because that defense is going to show up every game, and in the NCAA tournament when it gets real scrappy, you know. But like, I still don't think they're close to Connecticut.
So if you had, let's just say you had nothing on UConn. I know you said you got 11-1. If you had nothing, 6 to 1 plus 650, 5 to 1, that's not enough for you, or is that still
I mean,
good enough to bet?
I would probably play it just because I don't see UConn losing early on. And if that's in the tournament, so if that's true, you can get yourself to the Elite Eight pretty easily. And then, you could always hedge out if you don't like how they look. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No, it
you're
does.
probably better. It does make sense.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably better just money line parlaying them at this point, anyways. And you'll probably end up with more than 6 to 1, I would think. Even regardless of who they're going to play.
I was thinking of that too. I mean, the first one you basically throw away because that's going to be a minus what? I mean, that's
Yeah,
basically an
that'll
unbettable
be
one,
minus a billion. Yeah, but let's say they end up against a team that's like in Ken Palm somewhere between 30 and 34, right, in the second round, because that would be like the round of 32. You're looking at teams like Clemson, Villanova, TCU, Washington State, FAU. I mean, I guess they could pull an upset on
right?
UConn, but I don't think so.
Right. And what would a money line like that look? I mean, people just aren't, people don't have, even if it's the right thing to do. I was talking about this before. Like, even if it's the right thing to do, like the Chiefs were 6 to 1 before
Right,
the season, and they were 10 to 1 before the playoffs. If you money line
right,
roll over, you get 20. Like, people aren't going to do that. People will bet it
right.
and they'll lose their money on something else, or they'll start to get a little gun shy once that they start to see the bigger figures, and they'll bet a little less. There's just the
Yeah,
execution's not as always as easy as just, hey, I'm going to money line roll over. It's hard to execute for a lot of people, I think.
I agree with you. I wouldn't disagree with that.
So if I say UConn can't win it, would you who would you pick? Like, hey, UConn, you can't pick UConn to win. Who would be your second team? It sounds like Houston.
Mm, but I'm not real high on Houston, but let
Right.
me think. Who else do I really like? It's a tough question. I definitely think now that we're doing this little exercise, I definitely feel UConn is head and shoulders above
Right.
everybody else is really not that great. Um, I guess Houston would be my second pick. Definitely not Purdue or Arizona. In the Ken Palm, you have Purdue, Houston, Connecticut, Purdue, Arizona, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Illinois. Those are the top 8 teams right now in the Ken Palm. So now you're asking me, out of the other 8, what of the 7, who do you like the best? So Houston, Purdue, Arizona, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, and Illinois. I mean, I don't want Illinois. I don't want Auburn. I definitely don't want Alabama. No defense. Tennessee, maybe, and I definitely don't want Arizona or Purdue. So I'm stuck with either Tennessee or Houston. I guess I'll take Houston.
Yeah, I said on my open, their biggest enemy is the format, the fact that it's one and done. Because if this were NBA best of seven, you wouldn't be getting a 6, 7 to 1. You'd be getting,
Oh yeah,
maybe like 2, three
yeah,
to one.
yeah.
But
Of
it's just
course.
it's one or
Right,
done. Three
right.
point 3 point variance. You're making you have a night where you're not making your threes. You have a night you run into a team that shoots 54% from three. You might be going home no
Abs-
matter who you play.
Absolutely. I mean, Iowa State's number 9. I probably would like Iowa State
I like that team.
as the second best team. North Carolina's 10, Duke, Baylor, Creighton. Michigan State at 15 is a little interesting, but I don't think they're good enough to win it all.
Are they 15 in Ken Palm?
Yeah, on Ken Palm, they're number
Wow,
15.
I wouldn't have guessed that. I really wouldn't have guessed
Yeah,
that.
BYU 16, Kansas 17, San Diego State at 18. I like San Diego State.
A little rematch of last year.
I mean, they're just gritty. I mean, I keep saying this over and over. I like teams in the tournament that are gritty, and it just happens all the time because when everybody gets nervous, and everybody's in the sphincter tighten up scenario, you know, you want those teams that are just going to defend every possession, get a good shot every possession, not turn the ball over. Those are the kind of teams that I want.
Uh, so we've touched on a couple teams. Let's just go through a couple teams both ways. A couple teams you think are overrated, couple teams you think are underrated. Because like I said in the opening, like you gave out UConn, San Diego State to make the final last year. You overshadowed my FAU pick, which was a great pick, and
It
you
was unbelievable. Your FAU
yeah,
pick was amazing.
that was a hell of a pod we did. We're gonna have a hard time in a month or so living up to
We'll
that.
never do that. We'll never
No,
do that again.
I agree. Just about, you can take it any direction you want. Few teams that you think are overrated, few teams you think are underrated.
Okay. Are you going to give me the teams, or I'm going to just pick them?
No, just top of your head. Hey,
Oh,
this team you
oh,
think is a
okay.
little, yeah,
Well, San Diego State is 18th on the thing. I think they're underrated.
okay.
Wisconsin, I like Wisconsin. They're number 19. I mean, do I think number 19 in Ken Palm, Wisconsin is just as good as Purdue, Arizona, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Illinois, North Carolina, all those top 10 teams on UConn? I definitely do. Gonzaga at 20, I'm not high on Gonzaga. I don't think they're that good. Um,
Well, they're on the bubble too. I'm surprised. I got to refresh my Ken Palm rankings here. I'm surprised they're 20 because I
they're
think
20 on the
Lenardi,
Ken Palm.
right? Lenardi, I think
Yeah.
had them as the last team in or the last team out, like right on the edge of the bubble, which is strange. Can't remember the last time they weren't in the tournament. Boy, I'm surprised they're that high though.
I'm looking at some of these other teams. Kentucky, I think, is overrated. I'm not big on them. Dayton is 24. That's a team that I like a lot. They're like a poor man's UConn. They're kind of scrappy, smart team. Don't do stupid things. Who else over here? Like I'm trying to pick from somebody down a little bit
Let
further
me
that I
press you on
would say.
Kentucky because Kentucky, you could look at them either way. Hey, they don't play enough defense. There's flaws. There obviously are. Their lows are very low, but boy, their A game is impressive. And they actually defended against Ole Miss the other night. They defended Saturday in Auburn, held that team
Yeah,
in the 50s.
but
Could
they're
you
going to
see
have a
that?
crap. They're going to
Okay,
have a crap game, just like you said. They're inconsistent. That's not the kind of team you want in the NCAA tournament because when you have the bad game, goodbye. And so that's what I think will happen to Kentucky. They'll have a bad game. They're not shooting it well, and they'll be, out. So I'd much rather have the teams that are, here's a team that I think is slightly overlooked. Clemson. I really like
agreed.
Clemson. I like their coach. They're 30th on Ken Palm. I think they should be a lot higher than that. I think that's a good team.
Bad loss Saturday against NC State, which is not the worst thing in the world. And I actually thought of that with UConn because I think UConn's won 14 in a row. They probably got 5 or 6 regular season games left, maybe 3 in the Big East tournament, and then 6 in the NCAAs. If you're going to win I mean, it's very hard to finish the season like a 30-game winning streak. If you're UConn, maybe you want to mix in a loss here, whether it's the conference tournament, whether it's regular season. You kind of
Yeah,
want to get one out of your
I hear that.
system
I
before the
hear
season.
that.
Think
I
so?
definitely hear you. How about Wazoo at 33? That's kind of a team that I like. Very methodical, very smart, good coach. I like the Wazoo. I think they could pull some upsets. FAU we talk about all the time, and we think they're overrated. They're at 34 in Ken Palm, 99th on defense.
Bad.
They're not the same FAU as last year. So enough with their nonsense. SMU's another team I like. SMU's another kind of like, you know, under the radar type team. I'm not saying they're going to make it all the way, but they could make a run. Wouldn't shock me at all. I'm looking in the 40s, see if there's anybody. Nevada at 45 on the Ken Palm, really good on defense, really good on defense, and the defense usually shows up every game, so that's not a bad look. And looking at some of these other teams here, like further down, like if I'd be looking for like a team that I would say is like, a real long shotish team. How about Rutgers?
Ooh,
Rutgers, they're not. I mean, I don't know if they're going to make the tournament where they're like 14-10 or something like that, 6-7 in the Big Ten. But they've been really coming on lately, and they play defense.
a team I would have said a few weeks ago, a month ago, St. John's. St. John's has played terribly. Horrible loss Sunday against Seton Hall. I almost scored
Oh
like
my
19 points
God!
in the second half. Patino said after the game, this is the most miserable experience I've ever had," which is quite the quote.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's not a
they've been
good thing
bad.
for your coach to say.
No,
It's the worst experience I've ever had.
I think he said
Wow.
it's the worst experience of my life, something like that. Yeah, it's not.
I think that's a little much there, coach. But okay,
He's
he knows, right?
getting the troops fired up. Yeah, they had a big lead at the half. Just yeah, a terrible loss to Seton Hall, barring some miraculous run here, like running the table the rest of them. I mean, they're not going to get in the tournament. They have a long way to go to even get back on the bubble. Last,
I'll tell you
yeah, go
another
ahead.
team before you go on to the next thing. That's like more of a long shot. 68th and Ken Palm, San Francisco. I like that team a lot.
Good one. Good one. Yeah. It's, where did you say they were in Ken Palm?
They're 68th. They play defense and they have some offensive weapons too. I really like San Francisco.
Where I'm curious where Lenardi has him in the bubble. The thing is, when the brackets come out and the brackets come out late, everything's pushed back this year because it's not till St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, where the bracket comes out. Usually they're like a round or two into the tournament by then. So it's definitely a later tournament that opening Thursday is not like the 20th. So we still have a while. You don't like when the brackets come out, you don't want to be in a mode where you just pick every upset, but I agree. Some of these teams are dangerous. The Grand Canyons of the world, Indiana State, if they can get in, San Francisco. It's after UConn. I agree. There is a lot of parity.
Well, it's like last year. Remember going in last year, we said, "Oh, hey, anybody can win this
Yeah.
year." I feel like it's kind of the same thing. If you take UConn out, all the rest of these teams are the same. Houston, Purdue, Arizona, Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Illinois, Iowa State, North Carolina, Duke, Baylor, Creighton, Marquette, Michigan State, BYU, Kansas. I mean, this is all the same thing. You know, I'm not saying like there's aren't teams that I like better than others, but are they far and away better than the other ones I mentioned? That I don't think so.
Let's talk a little live betting. You do a lot of live betting, a lot of live betting totals. Can you walk people through your process? If you were teaching them how to do it, the things you look for, just you can be as detailed or as vague as you want, but just give people a little crash course on how to live bet totals.
I mean, I look at a lot of things. I was really doing well earlier in the season, and the last couple of weeks I've not been doing as well. But what I look at a lot is pace of games and games that are not being paced the way they were originally supposed to be played. So, just as an example, you have a game that's a 125 or a 129 pregame. It's supposed to be a slow game and the teams for some reason are playing up tempo, and by that you have to kind of know how many possessions does a 129 correlate to. So you would think a first half about 30ish possessions is a 129 game. Now of course there's a million other details, how many turnovers, what the fouls are, all there's a million things to know, but the first thing I would try to learn, if I was, wanted to get a lot into the total betting, is you have to learn about the pace and what paces correlate to what numbers. So, like a 152 is going to correlate more to like 36 possessions in the first half, all things being equal. And so that's kind of, where I would start if I was, wanted to learn about, totals betting and in game situations.
And we've texted a lot about this. Do you think your struggles are like the numbers are better, the numbers are sharper in terms of the totals, or is the fouling just not as predictable? Where like down 7, it used to be all right, foul right away, ease, quick score, and then that cycle starts where you can get 10, 12 quick points in 30 seconds, or is it a little bit of both?
I don't think that's happening as much anymore. I think there's a lot less fouls now. I don't have any data to back this up other than I watch a gazillion games, and it seems to me there's a lot less coaches and a lot less coaches both from the ahead and behind standpoint. When they're behind, they don't foul as much, and when they do foul, they take forever because they go, oh, let's get a steal first. An example would be today, Rhode Island down 9 with like 55 seconds left at home, doesn't foul. I mean, in the past, that was like impossible, right? I had a game earlier this year. BC was down 8 with 50 seconds to go, didn't foul. So you just didn't see that in the past. And now even when they do foul, I had a game that I needed over Columbia and Harvard the other day, and they take, let's say there's 32 seconds left, they're down 6. They try to get steals. They try to do a trap and steal a guy for 12, 7 or 8 seconds. Well, that is a huge thing because it knocks off possessions, at the end. In the past, there's 28 seconds left, you're down 6. You might take 1 second and then foul. Now it's like 5 or 6 seconds, and of course there are games that go both ways. I'm just saying in the
Right.
aggregate, if you look at all of them, I think there's a lot less fouling in the last minute.
Then
I
if you
could be
don't get
wrong.
that, if you trap and you don't get that steal right away, they break the pressure. Then the guy can go to over half court and just do the thing where he dribbles around and passes it, and then you could get
Yeah,
burn
it takes
8 seconds,
forever.
10 seconds, and then it gets to
Yeah,
the point. Well, hell, the defense like hell if 10 seconds burnt off, we didn't
right.
get our steal. Maybe we just call it quits anyway.
Exactly. And so I think that that's been definitely a factor. Um, you know, as far as end of game stuff, I think that's definitely been a factor.
All right, anything else college basketball wise?
I mean, I could talk about it for an hour, but I don't know how long your podcast is, and I'm not sure how much I'd like to divulge anyways.
I think we did enough. We'll end on this. If the 49ers and the Chiefs played again today or yesterday, and we're a week away from or a week removed from the season, who would you pick?
I'd take the Chiefs.
Oh, you would? I'm surprised. I
Yeah.
thought you'd say the 49ers.
No, I'd take the Chiefs. I just think that, because they're going to have the same coaches and they're going to have the same quarterbacks.
Right.
So, you know, uh, that was what the handicap was. If you remember our megapod,
Yep.
I was like, it's the quarterback and the coach. And
And
in
the
the end, that
defense.
kind of, yeah, I mean, in the end, that kind of proved correct. It's like if they, I mean, I think San Francisco should have won the game. They lost the game, in my opinion, in the first half. When you're only ahead 10-3 and you're supposed to be ahead by a lot more, how many times in the NFL do we see if you squander your chances to get up big, you end up losing the game? It happens so often, it's ridiculous. And if the other guy on the other team is Mahomes, you're in real trouble.
It's like in baseball. If you have the bases loaded 3 out of the first 4 innings and you look up and it's only 1-0, you're like, how the hell do we only have one run? It's usually not a good sign.
Exactly.
It's usually,
Exactly. Exactly. It's a great point.
yeah, boy, they pissed that game. Wait, did you have a major problem with anything with Shanahan taking the ball? Because I felt like a lot of people were playing the results a little bit, but I also would have kicked. What were your thoughts on the overtime?
Me personally, I thought you should take the ball, and I didn't think it was very large either way. But I think people discount the fact that it could have been 0-0 or
Yes.
3-3 as well. And then if it's 0-0 and 3-3, you want to have the third possession. And I think people are not, looking at that properly and be like, oh well, it's Mahomes. Well, they did get stops on Mahomes.
Mhm.
It's not like he went down the field on them every time. They did get stops, and stops do happen in overtime. So I think people, how people are, they just play the result. The guy's a genius if he goes for it on 4th and 3 and he makes it, and he's an idiot if he went for it on 4th and 3 and he misses it. They don't talk about the percentages, or when you're at the 1 yard line, they're if you give it to the running back, I give it to Marshawn Lynch every time. You remember that? Remember that whole
Yeah.
nonsense? Well, they found out Marshawn Lynch from the 1 yard line that year was 6 for 13. Okay, that was his number, 6 for 13. So don't tell me you're nonsense. Okay, a lot of these calls are just very, very close on the math. And so, of course, after the fact, all the dumbbells, of which most Americans are 99.9%, are going to tell you, oh, you should have done it. It was Mahomes. It was Mahomes. What are you crazy? It's Mahomes.
He would have gotten just as much criticism if he decided to kick off and he lost. He would have taken just as much heat, especially if, like you said, it went punt, and then Mahomes wins it on a field goal. People would say, how the hell could you give Mahomes a third possession? You got to get 2 out of the 3 possessions. I know that's my favorite thing when people are like, why are you thinking about the third possession? Well, the third possession matters if you split, if you just tie on the first possession, it matters.
Well, this is why I say all of life is gambling, and the problem is you don't get to play the simulation out 1,000 times, right?
Right.
You marry somebody, right? It's the biggest gamble you'll take in your life, probably, right? Guess what? You only get that one shot at that one time. You don't get 1,000 marriages to look it over and say, hey, well, 622 times she cheats on me and 324 times she's a good person. You know what I mean? You only get that one time. Yeah, so it's like that's the rough part.
Yeah, and what would you say? 30% of the time they probably match, 40%? Like what's a reasonable percentage that they match on their first possessions?
Oh, 0-0 and 3-3.
Yeah, turnover,
Um,
turnover, field goal, punt, punt.
I say, it's a great question. What is the percentage of 0-0 and 3-3? Because they're going to say, well, it's not going to be 7-7 because Mahomes will go for 2, which probably is correct, right?
And I think that's a
Um,
little boy, it's easy to say that after the fact. People can talk tough after, oh, I would have done this or that. I would have gone for 2. I don't know. Andy Reid's never been the most daring coach. I would have liked to see him give up a touchdown, score a touchdown, then really send out his team for the 2 point to win the Super Bowl, to win and lose the Super Bowl one. But
I know, but
even though it's the right
mathematically,
play, I'm not so
yeah.
sure.
Right, right. It sounds like it's so obvious, right? Might not have, like you said, he might not have done it. So you never know. What's the percentage of 3300? I don't know. It's got to be a nice chunk though. It's got to be 20, at least 20, 30%,
I
wouldn't you
threw out
think?
30%. I think a third,
Yeah.
third of the
Yeah.
time, something like that is pretty reasonable.
Yeah. And then in that case, you're probably, if it's 30%, you're probably like 18 to 12 to win if you get the third possession.
Yeah, and people were probably like, "Oh, Super Bowl's a week ago. Why are you talking about it?" Because we do the megapod all year talking football, and we don't have like a wrap up megapod with me, you, and Gilly. So
Right.
wanted to get your thoughts on that. And you're good with the live stuff. All right, Todd.
Yeah.
I think I'll let you go. I appreciate you coming on. Hopefully, we'll do this again soon.
Yes. And is my check in the mail for this, or how do I collect on that?
Get it from Fez. Fez will give it to you.
Oh.
You want to plug anything?
Um, if you want to, they can go to my Twitter at T Wishnev. I haven't had time to add more people to my WhatsApp in-game group because it just takes forever to add the people, and I've been busy and lazy, and so I have a whole backlog of people I still need to add. But you can always, send me a private message there and say, "Hey, I want to be part of your WhatsApp in-game live betting group." So that's fine if they want to do it, and I'll get to it as soon as I can get to it.
All right. Thanks again, Toddy.
Okay, I was just kidding about the check. You can just Venmo me.
All right, that'll do it. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you to Todd Wishnev. Enjoyed that. We will be back end of the week. I think we have Iron Eagle. We will discuss with him. Boy, we can go a bunch of different directions with him. NBA, college basketball, which covers both of those. Maybe his thoughts on some NFL stuff. We can put him to work. Again, see you at the end of the week. Appreciate you guys listening. Review, rate, subscribe, all that stuff. It helps. We appreciate it. See you Friday.